Awesome, awesome. Great to see everyone. Let's go ahead and kick off, y'all. Good afternoon or potentially a good morning, depending on where in the world you are joining us from. We are so happy that you were able to make time for CBEN and AFA today. So appreciate you all taking the time to join. For those of you who are new to CBEN or maybe even want a refresher, I want to remind you all that CBEN really, at the core of our mission, we believe deeply in a skills first future, one where people are recognized for what they know and what they can do, and not just what a credential says or a piece of paper. And we have been working for over 10 years now on building the systems, the standards, the infrastructure that help make that reality a possibility. And so our work has been very much rooted in competency-based learning across education and work systems, but increasingly we've been turning our attention to something that has always embodied this skills-first vision that we have long embraced. So apprenticeships and work-embedded learning. And the reason that we're doing that is because apprenticeships are where learning and work can really meet in the clearest and most tangible ways. They show us what's possible when education is directly connected to job performance and economic opportunity. And yet, across the US, too many apprenticeship systems are fragmented, inconsistent, and sometimes hard to scale or difficult to navigate. And the project on apprenticeship standards and interoperability at CBEN was designed to change that. And so for CBEN, PASI is what we call that project for short, represents the natural evolution of our work. We've helped institutions build competency-based programs. We've supported states in designing skills for systems. We've created national standards for skills validation. And apprenticeships really are the next frontier because if we want skills to be the bridge between learning and work, we have to strengthen and scale the bridges that have already been built. And so today you're going to hear more about what PASI is, how it works, how states and employers can engage. But first, we want to take a moment and zoom out and really look at that larger picture. And to understand why we need a project like PASI, we have to understand the current landscape of apprenticeships in our country. And there is no better guide for that conversation than John Colburn. John leads Apprenticeships for America, and we are so happy that he is joining us today to share his expertise and experience. So, John, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Lisa. And let me just say it has been such a pleasure to be partnering with CBEN over the last few months. Obviously, we've admired your work for a long time, but when Josh came over with the PASI project, we knew we had a great partner to work with on all of that. So again, my name's John Colborn. I'm with Apprenticeships for America. If you haven't heard of AFA, we're the National Trade Association for Apprenticeship in the United States. We advocate for the expansion of apprenticeship in federal and state policy. We do research on apprenticeship, and we act as a community of practice among people who are sponsoring, working on, thinking about advocating for apprenticeship. And so what I thought I'd do in this session is, just as Lisa said, give a little bit of an overview about where we stand as an apprenticeship nation. And then I'll turn it over to Josh, who's going to talk about the PASI project. So Josh, if you want to advance the slide here, it'd be great. Is it advanced? No? Yes, there we go. Great. The first thing that I think we have to acknowledge is that for many years, apprenticeship has sort of bounced along as a niche workforce development practice, known largely for its work, great work in the skilled trades. But outside of that was really not a very widely employed workforce development or education approach. And about 10, 15 years ago, that started to change. We had in the Obama administration some beginning calls for the expansion of apprenticeship. And now successively in Trump 1, in Biden, and in Trump 2, we've had successive administrations really looking at how to grow apprenticeship. And the result is shown on this graph here, which just shows that there's been almost a doubling of apprenticeship since 2015, 2014. And And that's really an impressive outcome, particularly in the United States, where we really have not devoted significant resources to apprenticeship. If you want to advance the slide, Josh, that'd be great. Um, Compared to our international competitors, we actually have almost no appreciable investment in apprenticeship. And apprenticeship really remains a pretty small percent of our workforce, about 0.3%. Whereas in other countries, that number could be as 2 to 3 to even high threes and low fours% of the workforce. Um, we continue to have our construction trades dominate apprenticeship, although in the last year, new apprentices in occupations outside of the construction trades for the first time constituted a majority of new apprenticeship registrations. Um, and so, and then if you just compare us to other countries, and next slide would be great, Josh. We really, you can see, we really have a ways to go, opportunities for growth here. And this really speaks to then to the ambitions of Apprenticeships for America. We think there's huge opportunities to grow apprenticeship. And what's more, we're starting to see public policy makers and the public at large agree with that. In part, I would argue some of this rediscovery of apprenticeship is really the result of 60 years of advancing a college for all model, which has done amazing things in terms of getting more people to college, but maybe reaching some natural limits. On this next slide, you'll see that we, even now, at 60 years into College for All, we have a large number of people who are still electing or not able to go to college. Even when people go to college, we have large numbers of people who aren't able to complete their college education. And even when people complete their college education, we have large numbers of people who end up employed in jobs that never required a college degree in the first place. And so here we have an enterprise that takes, pretty considerable resources and a lot of time from students with limiting results. And I think policymakers, the public, are starting to ask, is there a better way? We actually think, yes, there is a better way, and that's apprenticeship. And so at Apprenticeships for America, we see the opportunity to grow apprenticeships from our current 670, 680,000 people in apprenticeship to something like 4 million people in apprenticeship. If we do that, then when young people are leaving high school or when workers are changing occupations or looking for something that might be next to them, they will have a meaningful choice about going to college, which surely should be one of their choices, or looking at another way to prepare for a new job and an occupation, and that might be apprenticeship. So how do we think then about getting from where we are to where we might get to or might go? The first is that we do need some actions from government to help us along the way. None of the countries that you saw in that previous chart grew their apprenticeship systems on a purely voluntary, no-cost basis. And so the good news is that, as I said, across successive administrations, we've had interest from the president and departments of labor in growing apprenticeship. And so in this administration, the Trump administration has done two things that I think are really emblematic of that support. The first is that an executive order was issued last spring that established a goal of growing apprenticeship to 1 million. Now, of course, we think that should be 4 million, but we'll take 1 million as on the way to 4 million. And really set out some objectives for the Department of Labor and for the administration to be able to advance that goal. And then separately, this administration has also embraced apprenticeship as solutions to other kinds of problems. And here you see on that same day another executive order was released around artificial intelligence and preparing the workforce to be able to make good use of and to advance artificial intelligence in the economy, and identifying apprenticeships as one of the ways that we might get to that. So if we're going to move, oh, and then let me just say, not all of this is going to happen at the federal level. So we think states actually have a huge role in growing apprenticeship. And in fact, across the states, we're seeing a lot of innovation from states in terms of growing and supporting apprenticeships. Things that states are doing right now, well, they're doing a lot to make the administration of apprenticeship more efficient and more user-friendly, speeding up the time it takes to register an apprenticeship, making sure that the systems for registering an apprenticeship are user-friendly, and making sure that folks who are interacting with those systems have positive experiences. They're also putting their money where their mouth is. And so across the states, we're seeing a variety of funding mechanisms that are creating incentives for employers to participate in apprenticeship using tax credits or other kinds of incentives, incenting the development of industry-focused apprenticeship intermediaries that are signing employers up for apprenticeship and helping sponsor apprenticeship, and using pay-for-success models to encourage sponsors and other organizations who are helping to start apprenticeship programs with resources as apprenticeships are created. The other couple of things that folks are doing, they are integrating systems, integrating their education departments and labor departments, even procurement offices, to make sure that apprenticeships are being supported not just as a workforce development strategy, but as a broader talent and economic development strategy. And then many states are looking at ways to use apprenticeship to advance particular industries or to advance economic opportunity for particular populations. So with all of that, you would think we're on our way, and indeed we are. But growing to 4 million apprentices is going to require that we think of multiple pathways to grow apprenticeship. And so in my next few slides here, I just want to highlight a couple of pathways that Apprenticeships for America has identified as growth opportunities for apprenticeship in the United States. The first, and I know we have many represented on this call, is our community colleges. We really see community colleges as critical institutions to drive the expansion of apprenticeship. Community colleges already deliver related technical instruction, the classroom component of apprenticeship programming for many apprenticeships across the country. And their connection with their communities and with employers and businesses in the community makes them well positioned to act as apprenticeship intermediaries, acting as sponsors for apprenticeship, assisting employers in establishing apprenticeships, operating apprenticeship programs. And if we could do this at just a modest level of scale, you can see here, if we have just 5% of community college students in apprenticeship programs, we would have almost doubled the number of apprentices in this country. Another way that we can look at growing apprenticeships is to think about our four-year educational institutions. Internationally, we see the growth of the apprenticeship degree as one mechanism for expanding or extending apprenticeship into occupations that historically have required college degrees. And we think this marriage of the college degree with apprenticeship is really bringing together two great approaches for phenomenal outcomes. And so at Apprenticeships for America, we see significant opportunity to grow this particular approach. And if you think of it, in occupations like nursing and in education and teaching, in social work, we have already put a significant value on the idea of experiential learning as a part of the way we do education in those spaces. Apprenticeship simply formalizes this and frankly attaches it to a paycheck in a way that then makes it much more sustainable and accessible for a broader population of people. So as we address talent and hiring needs in occupations that require a bachelor's degree, we think there's opportunities to grow apprenticeship there. So if just 3% of the people who are enrolled in bachelor degree programs were working on apprenticeship degrees, that would equate to 270,000 people in our apprenticeship system. And then the last pathway, and by the way, we have many more pathways. But the last pathway I thought I'd talk about today is to talk about a particular kind of employer and their role in driving apprenticeship, and that's the public sector. If you were to look at who are the largest employers in counties across the country, in cities across the country, you would find the county government, the city government, the federal government, community colleges, water districts and utilities are among the largest public utilities are among the largest employers in our communities. And leveraging their hiring practices to advance apprenticeship would be hugely a huge growth driver for apprenticeship. We also think that there's some value in having the public sector demonstrate its own commitment, sort of walking the talk, so to speak, around apprenticeship, and as a way of stress testing our apprenticeship systems. You will learn a lot when you register an apprenticeship about what works in our apprenticeship systems and what doesn't work so well. So if you're on this call and you're a community college or you're a public university or college, ask yourself, could my institution be an apprenticeship sponsor? Do I have facilities that need to be maintained? Do I have financial clerks that need to be hired and could be hired through an apprenticeship program? And almost certainly the answer is yes. And the question then is, why not? Why can't we take advantage of the hiring that happens in our public institutions and put that to work for apprenticeship? Again, you can see here if 2.3%, relatively modest number of the workforce in our public sector institutions were hired as apprentices, we would have 460,000 apprentices added to our apprenticeship system. So there's a pathway to growth. There are things that the public sector can do to advance apprenticeship. We at Apprenticeships for America think the future is bright for apprenticeship, but that alone is not going to do it. We need to be thinking about how we make our systems and our processes around apprenticeship much more positioned for scalability. And here's where I think the PASI project is going to be so important for our growth. And I'm going to turn that over to Josh. Josh.
Maybe.
I'm
Maybe.
trying.
There we
I'm
are. Here
trying.
he
I'm
is.
sorry. Yeah, the doggone floating screen thing. Here we go. All right, let me reshare my slide deck here. Yeah, thank you, John. All right, y'all give me a thumbs up if I got the deck back on the screen. Cool. All right. So I appreciate that. I never get to listen to John without making notes. Like every time there's something that I pick up, I didn't know, and I've heard John talk as recently as last week. I had not caught the thing about non-construction occupations outpacing construction occupations for the first time last year. Like that's significant. That's huge. And those examples that John just gave us of opportunities for growth, I tallied them up and come up with over 1 million just in those 3 ways. When you look at those, there's not a single. It would be hard to find people in the apprenticeship or education community who would object to the idea of expanding apprenticeship in community colleges or expanding apprenticeship in universities and other higher ed degree programs or serving as apprenticeship sponsors in public sector. Then why are we not doing it? Why are we not expanding in those ways? Those are straightforward. Now they're not easy. There are things that are simple, but not easy. so why are we not doing that? And that's a little bit of what we're going to talk about here with PASI. By way of introduction, I'm Josh Laney. I'm the Vice President of Work Embedded Learning Apprenticeship at CBIN. I want to take just a moment here to point out, you see Vice President of Work Embedded Learning, WEL. Some of you are thinking that's a typo. It's not. That is an intentional choice and a decision that we lean into at CBIN. And the difference between work-based learning and work-embedded learning is, again, pretty straightforward. It's about intentionality. It is about not just placing an intern in a job site and letting them fetch coffee most of the time, and then occasionally they learn some things by osmosis. They're encountering things in the environment that they pick up and learn. It's about designing the learning intentionally and deciding what is that person supposed to learn while they're in that work environment, and the education institution working closely and hand in hand with the employer to make sure those things are put into that place, right? We're not going to just hope. I always say hope is not a strategy. We're not going to just hope that they learn stuff while they're there. We know what they need to learn. And that always starts with the employer telling us, well, what are the competencies? What are the things the person has to be able to do on the job? So that's the simple version of why you see us talking about work embedded learning versus work-based learning. We know we're not going to change the language of the entire world all at one time, but I just wanted you to understand what we were talking about. So what is PASI? I appreciate everybody so far calling it PASI. Well, this is the PASI team. The PASI team is Sarah Beth Hoffman has been working with CBIN for working on healthcare occupations, working in new and innovative apprenticeship programs in multiple states, expanding healthcare, working with institutions of higher ed. This is probably the fastest growing sector. I don't know that by number, but it's at least one of two fastest growing sectors of emerging industries and apprenticeship. Between healthcare and education, those two are both going very quickly. The healthcare space largely is focused right now in nursing apprenticeships because that's almost universally the biggest demand occupation. But there are a lot of other allied health occupations and other areas that really need to be moved over to apprenticeship as well. And then the rest of the PASI team, we've got Laylee White Oliver. She is the apprenticeship project manager for the East. She will be helping to wrangle the directors, and we'll talk about the work that we're going to be doing. She'll be helping to organize and be the point of contact for the PASI work in a totally made up Eastern region, by the way. I didn't even put the map in here because it always creates confusion. And then we've got Zach Miller handling the middle of the country. Zach is going to be leading that work there and helping us to facilitate the project. And then Rosalind Heineman out on the West Coast in California. All three of these people have deep experience in one form or another with registered apprenticeship programs, running projects at the federal level, or like Rosalind, for example, ran an outstanding early childhood apprenticeship project that was a program that was in California and was highlighted as part of some DOL work and ACA activities. So that's the team. So what are we going to do? PASI is it is a national project. The idea is to modernize and strengthen the U.S. registered apprenticeship system. And one thing I want to emphasize right out of the gate here is this is a state-led approach. So the idea is not that CBIN or PASI or me or the people you just saw on the screen are going to be deciding the questions that we're about to walk through. We are quarterbacking the work. We're asking the subject matter experts in the field, what is the right way to do these things? What are the right answers to these questions that we need to work on? And the idea is about improving the apprenticeship system and the scalability. As John mentioned, the idea of what do we need to do to move to scale? All of that has to be rooted in things that work, right? We have excellent examples all over the country of registered apprenticeship systems that are registered apprenticeship programs that are extremely innovative, that are doing exactly the kind of things that we just talked about with removing barriers for people, that are state-led, they're public sector employers, but those examples are sort of isolated one-offs in all too many cases. So what we want to do here is identify those things that are working in the field, those things that are employer driven, those things that have already been proven, and be able to replicate and scale that across the country. It's great to have one-offs, but that doesn't get you to a million or 4 million or however many apprentices that we need. I do want to make a point there about expansion overall. If we're talking about growing apprenticeship to a million employers, I'm sorry, a million apprentices, that's going to mean a lot more employers have to join the mix. That means that we've got to, as an apprenticeship system, make this process more clear. We got to make it simpler. We've got to remove some of the myths. And some of the myths are that there are barriers out there that are just insurmountable. This is very difficult. It's red tape, all of that. And that's not necessarily true, but sometimes it is. So we also have to own the challenges inside the apprenticeship system that have kept employers from coming to the table or kept them from really taking up this model over the years throughout the country. By my rough estimates, back of the napkin math, we will need about 45,000 more employers to get to a million active apprentices. That is no small feat. And when you think of it that way, to me, it's even scarier than just saying we need to add a third more apprentices. But we can't scale this system based on the idea of asking apprenticeship programs who already have employers who are already using it to just take 35% more apprentices than you have today. That's not how apprenticeship works. Employers are filling vacancies. They're hiring the people that they need. This is a fully voluntary system, and it's driven by employer demand. So what we've got to do is show the value, explain the value proposition, and make it so that our employers know that they can join and that this is going to be worth their time. So what are the goals of PASI? It's pretty straightforward. Three things. We want to improve the quality of registered apprenticeship in the nation. We want to improve the portability of the training and of the credential that is earned. And we want to improve the transparency that is behind that credential, that lets you see what is behind that credential. So these are goals. If you go back over the past 40 years and look at projects that have been established to try to expand apprenticeship and enhance apprenticeship, these are not new goals. This is the things we've been shooting for quite a while. Now, sometimes we lose our way and we start really focusing only on the number or only on the employer or only on the apprentice. It's got to be a fully invested system here focused on quality, portability, and transparency. So if those goals are, if you say old goals, they're long-standing goals, then what is different about what we're doing now? A lot of the previous efforts to accomplish these things have been what I would call centralized and top-down approaches. The U.S. Department of Labor has managed registered apprenticeship in the U.S. since, is it 1937? Catch me if I get that wrong, John. I think it's 1937, the Fitzgerald Act, right? And Wisconsin, I'm sure there's somebody on here from Wisconsin. Y'all were the first ones to have a state apprenticeship agency. We know it. You win. Good job, David Polk. It always takes him about 20 seconds to say they were first. But we've been doing this for a long time. And the U.S. Department of Labor has been trying to manage this system from the top down. They've applied valiant effort to do that. But I compare the idea there to if the U.S. Department of Education was to say that they were going to directly oversee an individual high school in some state, right? They were going to directly engage on who is registered to attend that school. What is the training that's going to go on there? How long is it going to take? Hey, why is that person, taking longer than they should to complete? We would think that was nuts. The U.S. Department of Education doesn't do that. And really pick any other federal agency, that doesn't happen. You don't have a federal agency trying to engage with the ground level implementation of those programs. It's typically fed to state, state to local. You've got a lot of local control. But the previous iterations of this for many years have been focused on what can the DOL do, the U.S. Department of Labor do, to better manage these programs and facilitate that in the state. So we are now moving away from that. We are now moving to a state-led, employer-driven approach. This has been, if there has been any success in Alabama, which I would argue with you that there has, that has been the key. It's been employer-driven first. We've got to have an employer at the table. They're the subject matter experts. And for my educators on this call, if I asked you to put into the chat, who is the customer of your system? Many of you might put that the student is the customer of the system, right? The student, the learner, that is your customer. We argue that that is not the customer. The customer is the consumer of the product. The product of the education system is the learner. So the employer is actually your customer. they're the ones that are consuming your product. Now, before anybody gets bent out of shape and thinks that we're commoditizing humans, the analogy is these are already diamonds, right? If you find a diamond in the rough and wherever you dig it out of the ground, that thing has value, innate value baked into it from the day you find it. But every diamond becomes more valuable when it is polished and a gemologist goes in and puts all the right cuts on it and makes it into either the diamond ring or the diamond earrings or the whatever it is that you want. That thing has more value because of the treatments that are applied to it. That's the logic that we use when we're talking about an employer as the customer. It doesn't demean or diminish the position of the learner in any way. It is still valuable. The learner is still valuable. And unlike the diamond, they get to go out and demand their own value on the market. And if we've prepared them well, they get to demand a higher value for themselves. So this is a benefit all the way around. So this approach is new to the Department of Labor. I would argue that leaning heavily into a state-led approach is a new angle that they're taking. They're not just doing that with the PASI initiative. They're also doing that by signaling a move to support more state apprenticeship agencies. I won't go off on that tangent lecturing about how many there are and all of that, but there are two different ways registrations in states are handled, either directly by the state through an SAA or state apprenticeship agency, or managed by the U.S. Department of Labor through an OA state. The feds have signaled, hey, we're going to start supporting more of this state-led, state-managed approach in apprenticeship. So what are we specifically going to do? We cannot solve all of the ills of every part of the registered apprenticeship system. We need to identify what is it that we are going to work on. Now, we do have a sister project in Colorado that I hope you will also learn more about that is tackling other aspects of this in another project. But our project is dealing with, again, that quality, portability, and transparency of the registered apprenticeship and its credential. Step one that we are going to work on is definitions. Any of you who have ever worked with me know that I'm obnoxious about a lot of things, and one of them is definitions. Words have meaning, and if you abuse the meaning of those words, we're not communicating. When people call things apprenticeships that are not apprenticeships, that confuses employers, that confuses learners, that confuses schools. It muddles the water when we're talking about, hey, we need funding support from the state legislature or the federal government or whatever to, as John was talking about, the pay for performance models. Well, if anything is an apprenticeship, then what are we even measuring? What are we even comparing this to? So one of the lessons that we learned very early on when we started this in Alabama is we needed to have a common set of definitions. So we developed that. The Governor Ivey at the time told us basically get in the basement, don't come out until you all agree on a set of definitions. So the Department of Commerce, the Department of Labor, Department of Education, the Commission on Higher Ed, we all got in there and we came up with a common set of definitions. We are going to be working on that as a national example. Just as an example of the difference here, when you say something is an internship versus something is a cooperative education versus something is a registered apprenticeship, what's the difference? What's the distinction? Often we run into people who say, oh yeah, I've got an apprenticeship program. They don't, but you can't just say, oh no, that's not that. Don't call it that. You need to give them the right terminology. What is it and how is that different? So we'll be working on that set. We've got I think we're at version 0.9 ready right now. This is something that we'll also be coordinating with John and AFA to put out for mass feedback very soon. We want to hear your opinions on this. Again, we're quarterbacking the work. We're not going to decide what the right answer is. We're going to poll the apprenticeship landscape and find out. We get those definitions, then we're communicating. Now we're able to talk, right? Now, what jobs are we talking about? What are the jobs that we really need to be focusing on? Here's a little secret for you in apprenticeship land. Not everything needs to be an apprenticeship. There are jobs that do not require an apprenticeship. It doesn't need that much training. I'll probably make half the room mad in a room full of healthcare employers, but certified nursing assistant does not need to be a registered apprenticeship program. Y'all can spam me with hate mail now if you want to. It doesn't require it. And just like we worry about degree inflation, where we require, hey, why does the assistant at the office, why does that person need a bachelor's degree? It's just some artificial signal that we've attached to, I don't know, to gatekeep who can go through this system. We want to be just as careful about that in registered apprenticeship. We don't want to start inflating the training requirements just so things fit what an apprenticeship is. So what jobs are we going to focus on? CBEN, before I was even here, worked with the state of Alabama to develop a 5-part test. In Alabama, we have a 5-part test to determine what we call high demand occupations. Probably bad language because it makes people think we're talking about volume of jobs. That wasn't just the test. But it looked at things like, is that occupation 70% of the median wage for the region? Does it include a post-secondary credential of value? Does it show positive growth over the next so-and-so number of years? That is the next thing we're going to be working on collectively among all of the state registration agencies, OA and SAA states, identifying what are the quality factors that we should be looking at for a high impact occupation. It's easy to say no to the bad stuff. It's easy to say yes to everything if you have an infinite pool of resources, but we don't. The hard part is saying yes to only the best choices. And we want to give states and employers and participants a way to objectively determine what do we need to invest our training resources, time, and dollar and effort and energy in. High impact occupation assessments. That might wind up being 70% of the median wage or whatever it is. Even if we come, let's just stick with that for a moment. If we come to a consensus and we say, all right, the national norm we're going to use is 70% of the median wage. That's just what we use in Alabama. But then Texas takes that home and they say, you know, we really think it ought to be 80. Like we think in Texas, we want to use 80. Cool, fine, great, use 80. But at least now we're all talking about the same quality factors. Even if you set your limit at a little different spot than somebody else does, okay, but we at least now are giving a clear process by which we're making this determination. The next thing we're going to do is build a quality framework. So CBEN's expertise has been in competency-based education for years. National leader, period, hands down. I don't just say that because I work here. They are the ones who can tell us what does it take to do good competency-based education. Well, that is one side of the apprenticeship coin. We need to determine right now, when we look at a work process in apprenticeship, what is it that makes that work process good or not good? What are the quality factors we're looking for in the related instruction side that make this acceptable, high quality training? On the other side of that apprenticeship coin, of course, is the OJL, the on-the-job learning. We've been talking about competency-based on-the-job learning measures for quite a while in apprenticeship world. We have not been putting the two things together. So this quality framework, CBEN will take the lead on developing the RTI side assessment. Essentially, if you want to call it a rubric, whatever, would develop what is a good set of quality training on the related instruction side look like. And Urban Institute, one of the partners that we have for this project, Urban Institute will be helping us on the job learning side. They've done great work over the last several years, creating these national occupational frameworks, well-researched, very well-written competencies on the job. We take that then rubric that we have, we use the high impact occupation assessment to determine where we want to start, plus feedback from our federal steering committee. And then we start working on occupations. What are those jobs? So let's just pick ship fitting right now. I'm just going to grab one. The Department of Labor has indicated, and other state federal agencies have indicated there's going to be a big investment in building boats coming here soon because that's a national priority. So let's say we're going to work on ship fitting. We take it that quarter and we put that, the first thing is all of those apprenticeship project managers you saw on that first slide, they're going to reach out to those states that they're responsible for and say, hey, if you've got a work process for ship fitters that is currently in use by employers, one of the most common questions I get here is, well, how is this going to be employer vetted? Right there. We're only going to evaluate stuff that employers are actually using today. We're not pulling things out of the 50-year-old filing cabinet. Current employers today, we get all of those and we say, hey, state, give me your best examples, the ones you're really proud of ship fitter. We put all of those into the Apprenticeship Standards Library. If you haven't seen that, it already exists, apprenticeshipstandards.org. That was a project, that was a product of the previous iteration of this work. We're going to be making significant enhancements to that. The very first thing we're going to do is get a lot more good samples of work processes in there. So when somebody goes to start creating a work process and wants to register a new program, they can go to that website, search for that occupation. Here you go. Here's a bunch of good samples. But right now, there's just a bunch of good samples in there. And it is every time you go to look for it, you got to dig through those documents and really take a deep dive to determine, is this a good one or is this just one that got thrown into the mix? So once they're in the library, stick with the ship fitting example. We'll say, all right, everybody, you gave us your good examples of ship fitter. Now let's use the rubric that we all just developed. And as a state, I'm going to pretend I'm still the director in Alabama for a minute. I'm going to look at all of these ship fitter examples and I'll say, that one, that one, that one, and that one. If you brought that to me as a potential sponsor, I would register that in Alabama. It would be good to go. And in the library, it'll get a little stamp next to it for the state of Alabama. Right there, we've just saved the state registration agency a whole bunch of time in developing new processes. We saved the employer sponsor a whole bunch of time because they don't have to guess what that state's going to want and ask for. So that's the first benefit of that little stamp process. The next benefit is right now in Mobile, Alabama, we build big pieces of submarines. We don't put the submarines together though. We do a lot of work building submarine parts, and then they go somewhere else on the East Coast and they're built together into the whole submarine. That's the same company operating in multiple states. So now I can go as that multi-state employer to the library and say, hey, I need ship fitters in both Alabama and I don't know, I'm just in North Carolina, wherever else they're put together. I honestly don't know where they're put together. I can go in there and filter that and find this work process would be acceptable in both places. We've now eliminated one of the other big barriers to scalability, and that's the interstate operation. When you've got multi-state employers, if you want to really hear somebody fuss about how difficult apprenticeship is, go find a multi-state employer that's tried to register in more than one place. It drives them nuts because everybody has completely different requirements. Now, we're not going to get into the ratios, the wages. Every state still has their own ownership of that. We will encourage them to be more realistic and consistent with that, but that's not what we're really talking about. We're talking about the training, the OJL and the RTI. Then on a national scale, those stamps accumulated across all of those work processes will also serve us nationally to be able to go, hey, we put 40 examples out there and shipfitter and was evaluated by all these states. Out of that 40 examples, hey, there's 4 or 5 right there that were pre-vetted by 25 or 30 states. There you go. There's your national gold standard. We don't need to go and draw together a bunch of people and create a new hypothetical national standard that we can build towards. We start to move toward consistency when we're telling a sponsor, hey, yeah, grab one out of the library that is pre-vetted by Alabama. The library, the logic in there is going to show you the ones that are pre-vetted not only by Alabama, but also by the highest number of other states. So just like a Google search result brings you the best examples first, theoretically anyway, this is going to bring you the best answers to your search query at the top of the list. So we start now to drive that consistency. That gets to the portability part that we were talking about, right? So if I'm an apprentice in Alabama and I take a machining program and I try to move to Montana to go up there and work, my friend in Montana, I show them the employer that completion certificate that I have from Alabama. They have no idea what training I had to do to get that certificate, right? There's no visibility into that. If you think about the portability of a bachelor's degree or a master's degree or whatever, people don't really know what's behind that credential, but over the years, we have come to believe that the credential itself had enough value that we would just accept it as an indicator of quality training. So we want to be able to give visibility into the credential so that folks can say, oh, yeah, this is the training that you've had. I can now treat your credential as a portable, valuable thing, be able to hire you. So I'm improving the portability of the credential, which by increasing the transparency, which then also allows the worker better more mobility. So again, I focus so much on this has got to be an employer-driven model, but it doesn't leave the worker out of the scenario. The worker is benefiting because they can take that credential now and know that they're going to be able to get a job in other places. And then the last thing we're going to do is develop some new national work processes for things where there just aren't good national examples right now. Currently, nursing apprenticeship, really the only statewide example of nursing apprenticeship is still in Alabama. Massachusetts has got one that they've been working on that they're about to launch. It's going to be good to go. There's several other states that are working on it, but we can't say right now that the model in Alabama is the national standard. It can't just be first one to the table. So we are also going to be helping to facilitate the development of new work processes where there are none or there are no good ones so that we get a consistent set of choices that we can then evaluate and say, oh, now we've got 5 or 6 states that are doing it. We can see, yeah, here's really the national best practice. The new work processes, we will not be focusing on one-offs, right? We're not an intermediary. To be real clear, we're not here to specifically try to help individual sponsors register in individual states. That is the responsibility of that state apprenticeship agency. Now, if you're struggling with it, I've got all their phone numbers and I'll be glad to help you navigate that system. But when you've got a state level development that's going on, we can help with that. That's where we want to be because this is about scale. We want to work on something that is going to be at least a state level implementation, if not a multi-state implementation, so we can get to scale. All right. Why it works, the states are going to get, I kind of covered this, the states get access to high quality work processes that are ready off the shelf. If you read some of the language in some of the presidential executive orders, they talked about off the shelf registration. That's cool, but where's the shelf? There isn't one right now. Apprenticeshipstandards.org is going to be the shelf. There's the place you pull it from. But you also got to know that the things on the shelf are valuable and high quality, or you pull something off the shelf that is outdated and 50 years old. And believe me, those things are still in operation today. Looking at you, accordion maker, right? That is an existing active occupation listed in our system. We got to do better than that. The employers get the widely recognized, they get trusted, widely recognized work processes to support their business needs and their workforce development. And then the workers get that portable credential, recognized skills. They're valued across different occupations and industries. So that's sort of the summation of everybody's benefit from it. What are we asking you to do? What you do in this is maybe different depending on where you sit in this situation. I really want to lean in on, Lisa said something earlier about what I call the fat chef problem. Do you want to eat food from a fat chef or a skinny chef? Fat chef. I want to eat the fat chef's cooking because he eats his own food. A skinny chef, I don't trust. If you are an education institution in this situation and you're saying, you know what, I'm fired up about this apprenticeship thing. I want to go and build some apprenticeship programs. You can't do that without an employer. But as Lisa mentioned, or no, maybe it was John, you are an employer. Let's start there. Some of the best examples of university apprenticeships that we've seen and have been able to build started with that university saying, hey, I've got job vacancies. I'm a training provider. Why don't I do this for myself, learn the ropes, learn the system, and be an active participant in a system that I'm then advocating that other people take advantage of? If you come to me telling me all about, as an employer, you're telling me all about how you're going to solve my workforce challenges, but you don't even use the thing that you're telling me to do, and I'm looking at your website and you got 120-day-old openings that just keep getting reposted because you can't fill them, I'm questioning the validity of your ability to do the training. The other thing is think systems over samples here. That goes back to that one-off deal that I was talking about. Whether you're a state agency, an intermediary, a university, we've got to stop building all of these one-offs, these individual pilots. The bigger the system that we, bigger the group that we can put in, the better we can make that a systemized process. And then build consensus around this concept. There are still people, if you look at the European models, this is even John's slides compared apprenticeships in the US to apprenticeships in several European countries. That is a completely different system. The German system, for example, very consistent. You know exactly what you're going to get out of an apprenticeship, an apprentice when they're trained in a German apprenticeship model, because there's one entity in that country that blesses those apprenticeships. Problem is, we don't have that in the US, and there's no going backward to get to that. We can't get there. So the only thing we can do is build consensus around the idea of a system-wide model, not individual one-offs. Let's stop thinking of ourselves as a collection of 53 entities that are doing apprenticeships and start thinking of ourselves as all part of an apprenticeship system. All right, that's my last slide. I'll cut this off in just a second. I do want to highlight, we do now have a landing page, cben.org/PASI. As we develop more materials and we go through and start putting out more of this work, if you want to stay plugged in on that, go to that website. There's a place where you can sign up for a specific email list about this work. There is also at the bottom of the page a CBEN newsletter more broadly about work-embedded learning, about all of competency-based education. Sign up for both. But if you want to learn about the apprenticeship part, there's a specific part right there where you can sign up for a PASI newsletter. Boom, that's as fast as I can go. All right.
Awesome. Josh and John, thank you so much, John, for painting kind of the current landscape and all of the potential and possibility that is out there, and Josh for giving such a thorough overview of PASI for the first time, really, to the world. So it's been long coming, and we appreciate that. I do just want to ask a couple questions, and for folks in the chat, if you have questions, please feel free to type them. I know we only have 10 minutes, so I'm going to ask John and Josh to keep these answers as brief as possible. But John, the first question isn't an easy question. I'm just going to give you that heads up. So we know that there were recent changes, as recent as just a day or two ago, at the Department of Ed that may have some impacts on apprenticeships. What can you kind of tell us about those changes and what impacts do you predict, at least in the near term?
Yeah, great. So I think you're referring to the agreements that are being put into place to assign functions that have been done by the Department of Education over to the Department of Labor and to other agencies, all as part of the Trump administration's goal to skinny down, one might even say eliminate, the Department of Education. And I think we have sort of two takes on this at Apprenticeships for America. The first is there's opportunity in here. I think those of us who think about the need to get away from these silos of talent development and think more broadly about how we do talent development in the United States, the idea of having our apprenticeship and workforce development systems linked to and tied and operating out of the same department as the department that deals with community colleges and four-year institutions and secondary education. There's some intelligence there that makes sense and opportunities. On the other hand, we also know that when you're doing these major reorganizations, there's just a lot of work that's part of that, and a lot of confusion that goes along with that. So look at the Department of Homeland Security that was created in the aftermath of 9/11. It took over a decade, and some people would say it's still going on, to really get all the agencies that were combined together under that rubric to have any sort of sense of working together. And so our worry is that with all that confusion and hard work to sort of bring together those organizations, we lose focus on things like the growth of apprenticeship and so on. We will see where all this goes. There's probably going to be litigation here. Congress might actually have something to say about all of this, and we'll see. But clearly, there's both opportunities and then some challenge in these moves.
John, thank you so much. And Josh, I'll start with you. I'm going to ask a question from the chat, actually. And please, John, feel free to jump in. I know earlier, Josh, I think you had mentioned that we need like 40,000 more employers at the table to actually grow and scale apprenticeships. And one of the questions in the chat was, is there kind of an overarching plan to reach employers, or who does that now, or what can be done to help us get to that number? Josh, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that is the key. I mean, ultimately, we've got to be able to carry this word and carry this product out to the employers. As we move towards more and more state apprenticeship agencies, that becomes more and more the responsibility of each state, which is really where it makes sense, because they understand their local workforce needs much better than on a national scale, trying to look down at that. Our partners, I see David Polk in here. I don't know if you heard me, David, give the jab at you about Wisconsin, but David Polk is the president of the National Association of State and Territorial Apprenticeship Directors. Those people are the key, right? Those folks that are actually the ones registering the programs have to be facilitating, making this an employer-friendly process, and then communicating to the employers why this is not your granddaddy's apprenticeship. And you might have heard from peers or other employers that have tried this before that it was difficult. I get bent out of shape sometimes about these things when I hear employers talking about how hard it is to register and how much red tape there is. If that's the experience you're having, somebody's doing it wrong. We've got to fix our own challenges. I hesitate to even say this dirty word on here, but IRAPs. IRAPs were created years ago because the employers were so tired of trying to push through the registered apprenticeship system that we just created a whole new avenue around it, and the whole thing blew up and that didn't work and whatever. But we've got to do better. If we want people to do this, then we, as the apprenticeship system, have to clean up our house. We have to find what are those pain points, what are those things that are stopping people from participating. And then, John, you articulated better than I do about pay for pay for performance.
Yep.
I think that's a key here too.
Yeah, if I can just say, I think we have a really cumbersome, the limited amount of resources we have for our apprenticeships are not always well deployed. And sometimes we end up supporting projects, well-meaning, well-intentioned projects that just don't create any apprenticeships. Our take is the money should be tied to creating apprenticeships. So as we are amassing public resources to be able to support apprenticeship, we think you reward the people, the organizations, the entities that are actually registering apprenticeships, and we call that pay for apprenticeship. And if you do that on a reliable, dependable basis that you can use year in and year out, then you can actually do some planning and some structuring of your work on the expansion of apprenticeship, and you're not living hand to mouth, grant to grant, trying to put all this together.
Josh and John, I know we only have about 4 minutes left here, and I'm curious for the folks that are on this call and really spanning state systems, intermediaries, colleges, universities. What is something tangible that they could do to get involved and to kind of get started on this road or to make progress between maybe even now and the next 3 months or something? Maybe something that's not so lofty that it feels unattainable. John, do you want to kick us off?
Sorry, yes, absolutely. So the first thing is that if you're not already in touch with your state apprenticeship office or the state agency that's helping develop apprenticeships, you should be in touch with them. You should have a relationship with them. You should know what they're up to. Give them a call. Take somebody out for a cup of coffee. Figure out who those people are. Maybe it's your local workforce board that's really active in this. There are lots of different ways to connect, but really encourage you to make those connections, figure out what's the ecosystem in your community that's doing this work. The second is ask yourself, not only how can I help support apprenticeship, but how can my institution sponsor apprenticeship? So as Josh has said, and I've said, one of the best ways to learn the apprenticeship system is to sponsor one. And if you have any say in your organization about how hiring gets done for supporting the facilities in your organization or the financial office in your organization or what have you. I know my organization, my last job, we had behavioral health people. We knew we needed to hire in those roles, and we just figured, let's do that as an apprenticeship. We did. We learned a lot about the hiring, about the registration process, and about apprenticeships. And then we actually created some apprenticeship programs as well. And then the third thing I would say is, if you're already on this road, ask yourself where there are opportunities to grow the apprenticeship work you've been doing so that you're using multi-employer apprenticeship models or other models that are prone to scaling. And that we move away from bespoke one by one single employer apprenticeship to scalable models that actually can create opportunities for growth. What would you add, Josh?
No, I think on your first point about those contacts, I would just want to throw this in there. If you are having any difficulty figuring out who that person is, because it can be convoluted, our project managers, you can count the PASI team as a cheat code for that. Hit us up, send us an email. We will help you figure that out because we're already working on that. We need this exact same information. So reach out to us. We'll help you find the right points of contact within your state. The other thing is it's sort of a mental flip that we've all got to make. If you're an education institution, you're thinking about doing apprenticeship programs, this is a hard one. Track with me here. These are no longer, if they're apprentices, they are no longer students for whom you're seeking a little bit of work experience. These are somebody's employees who are being sent to you for professional development. I know it sounds, but if you can think of it in that way, then we start to schedule differently. The biggest enemy of this whole thing is the way we've always done it, whether that's counting hours to pretend like we're counting skills, or whether that is, setting the design of a program and then telling the employer deal with it. Teaching, nursing, mental health, all of those things. Somewhere long ago, we recognized that the best way to learn those were on the job. So we started putting clinical hours and practicum placements and stuff like that in there, but we didn't pay anybody for them. So it actually became a new barrier. You can't go become a teacher or you can't go become a nurse unless you can afford to work for free for this period of time. Apprenticeship can solve that. So that's the biggest thing. It's really just a kind of a mental transition that we've got to make here to delivering these things in a different way. Stop pretending that you sat in the chair long enough means that you're qualified, and flip to who is your customer? It's the employer, it's the consumer.
Josh and John, thank you so much. And Josh, I think you ended on why we believe competency-based approaches that eliminate time as the proxy for what we know, combined with apprenticeships, are really a powerful combo. If you are interested in learning more, please reach out directly. You can reach out to Josh at c-ben.org or info@c-ben.org. But thank you all so much for making the time to attend. John, thank you so much for joining us on our webinar today.